Hey, all right.
Yeah, there we go. So you
House.
you do sort of audio video production type stuff, right? Or I don't know if you do some cool stuff when you're DJing, but I'm assuming you know how to. I've been fiddling around with audio stuff recently with virtual audio cables, trying to route things different ways on my computer. So
Oh, cool. Actually, that sounds great. I've never done that. I'm much more of the traditional cables guy, and but increasingly in the box. But mostly, I mean, I've been doing radio and various kinds of DJing for a long time, and mostly what I do audio-wise now is edit audio, like put mixtapes together or cut various audio. Hey, David. Charles.
David.
Hi.
So yeah, that talk more about it. I love it. I love all that stuff.
Cool. Yeah, I've got one kind of neat toy I want to play with today. But I guess first, have the two of you met, or I'm guessing not?
I've had the pleasure. And
cool.
You guys are in a similar area, I think, close by somehow. Is that right?
Yeah, actually, I met David physically for the first time in a meetup in Toronto that was about peer-to-peer and decentralized web technology. And though I think I'd seen him online for quite a while before, just through, I don't know, must have been pattern language or some sort of thing I was curious about, and because I recognized his avatar sort of floating around in lots of interesting places. And I guess there's a connection there. You're working with Tom Atlee on the Wise Democracy pattern language stuff, correct?
Yeah.
Cool. Well, that's one thing we could potentially map today is I know you wanted to get those cards on like a more visual map, so we could play with that. If you
want. Yeah, I'd love to. I mean, just to catch up, kind of see where we can. What are the next steps and all that. So David, again, it's a pleasure. So you're familiar with Tom Atlee's work then in that pattern language?
Yeah, I was at the Pearl conference in Portland, and Tom was there.
Oh, okay. What was the name of it? I didn't hear it.
Pearl, Portland Urban Architecture Research Lab.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Okay. And how long ago was that?
October.
Okay. Okay, very good. Yeah, so I'll give you the quick story. So one of the big things that I've been involved in for almost 2 years is a thing called Climate Change and Consciousness. It's a conference coming up quite shortly this month at Findhorn in Scotland, Eco Village over there. And Tom is actually going to zoom in from Eugene, and I'll be holding the space over there. So we're co-leading a workshop on his pattern language, and the name of the workshop is Wise Participatory Governance. And so essentially using this pattern language, but I'm not sure how, so then you heard, let me see, in October it wasn't so clear as a plan and on a timeline, but now, just now, these weeks, there's being birthed a new version of the pattern language. I'm not sure if you heard about that. Version 2 is in a blog and coming on the website, and they're printing it into a deck of cards in a box as a package, and that will have 96 patterns. It's up from the original 70 patterns. And so I've been involved somewhat in that, mostly editing and kind of preparing for the printer, but also getting this workshop together more or less at the same time with Tom for again, this month coming up in a couple of weeks. So that's a quick thing, and it was actually through Tom that I met this woman who had the idea for the conference and then got very involved in the conference. So there's also some history there. Just a couple of things I can mention to you. And just to catch up on what Rob was just mentioning, Rob, maybe you also saw Rob's Kumu map that he did for the first version of Tom's Wise Democracy set, and now we're talking about updating it for the new version.
Yeah. So the direction I'm headed, because I've been in the pattern language community since 2014.
Okay.
And at IBM, they use pattern language as IBM Global Services method. So I'm involved with that way back. And so moving towards doing stuff on Federated Wiki and they're doing a lot of work right now on graphing in Federated Wiki. And I think it's actually not stable yet, so we'll find out tomorrow, because I hope to be on the call with Ward tomorrow and find out what the state of that is.
Oh, okay, cool. And I guess you already know 40 Foxes, David Boville, because he's also quite involved in all of that, as I understand, as I'm getting to know now. Yeah.
See them a lot.
Right on. Okay. Cool. So, yeah, Rob. Yeah, where would you like to go, or David? What were you thinking? You've been caught up a bit on the MetaCAugs and the kind of legacy there.
No, so I just got back from Shanghai, from 3 weeks in Shanghai on Thursday night. I'm still jet lagged, and so I just came to lurk actually and learn a little bit, because I don't quite understand what all the directions that Robert's going. So I'm just going to hang out. So you guys go ahead and do what you're going to do.
Oh, cool. No, very good. No, it's great. Okay, and so we don't know who else is coming or what else was sort of.
Yeah, well, it wasn't just for context, I guess. Actually, and one thing I'll do is I'll start, because there's a bunch of stuff I want to share, screen share. So I'll just start screen sharing. This wasn't exactly what I wanted to show, but yeah, so just for context, there's a channel. I ran like a bit of a doodle poll, not to find a specific time for one meeting, but for a sort of a time that works on an ongoing sort of weekly basis. So this seems to be the time that will work for the most people sort of in an ongoing way. But yeah, I think I'll create some means for somebody to each week to say like, yes, I'm like, confirm you're coming or not. So we sort of know how many people are showing up. The one thing I wanted to demo today is this really cool tool that I've found recently called Otter.ai. So actually, I'm recording on Zoom, but I'm also recording on Otter AI and pumping. I was telling Charles before you joined, David, that I was playing with using virtual audio cables on my computer to sort of route audio into different directions. So I'm routing both my microphone with this sort of open tool, both my microphone and also the desktop audio, so what you guys are saying. So basically it's auto transcribing here, which you can see. Oh, and now we have Jim, or both Jims.
Yeah, well, we were both on the original link from.
Sorry, I changed that sort of last minute.
We were having a lovely chat, so it's fine. We're learning all sorts of interesting things.
Cool. Well, I sort of have been setting up a lot of different things recently, and I re-signed up for a Zoom Pro account and just decided to sort of change it. So next week it'll be back at this link. I'm just showing off Otter AI, which is kind of a sort of AI-based machine learning transcription service. So I'm recording on Zoom, but I'm also pumping our audio, both my microphone and also what I'm hearing from you guys, into this transcription tool. So you can sort of see it live transcribing. And what's really neat about this is technically it's collaborative. So I can share this link with you. And I've created a group called MetaCAugs and Co-Devs, and it's actually shared in there. So I can, I don't know, this is one thing, you'd have to make an account on Otter AI, but what's, how do I share? Anyways, you can shoot me your email and I'll add you to the group if you're interested. But what's nice is we can go back in after, and technically the tool should be able to recognize people's voices, so it'll attribute who's saying what, and you can go in and edit this later to sort of correct things. But so yeah, it means we'll have sort of auto transcribed notes that we don't need to frantically sort of write down our own if we don't want to. The other thing I wanted to show, I don't know, we could play on MetaMaps if we wanted. I shared a link if you wanted to create an account there. We could sort of develop a live agenda or something. But for this call, at least, I think I'll just reopen it up and we can just sort of figure out what we want to talk about rather than me screen sharing the whole time. I'll stop there. Yeah, just that's sort of a flavor of what I'm hoping these calls can be, sort of like a mix of demoing what we're working on, some interesting tools, and yeah, how do we augment ourselves with things like Otter AI, or how do we augment the conversation with things like MetaMaps, or the other tool I shared in the channel was Miro, which used to be called Real-Time Board, which is kind of nice, another nice tool for having a collaborative visual space we can be working in.
That's awesome stuff.
Actually, maybe I should keep just screen sharing because then at least gives a sense of.
Yeah, I'm not getting to that map. I'm getting to the MetaMaps main page.
Okay, well, here I will share this link in the, I guess, multiple places. It's now in the Mattermost, and if I can find the chat here.
That's where I got it. Was in Mattermost.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah, now it's in the Zoom.
Yeah, this one works.
Cool. And yeah, it's going to be messy. I'm not used to being some sort of like maestro with all these tools. This is sort of new for me doing this. But once somebody joins the map, I can sort of demo a little bit about what makes it collaborative. MetaMaps itself is sort of something I've been working on with Connor Turland, who's also on the Holo team. Since 2012, it's sort of been dormant. It's more of a prototype at this stage, but it is still useful if we wanted to use it.
So how do I put some? Oh, I can't edit this map.
Oh, well then that means
I requested, Rob. I haven't used it in a long time, but if you
there, I always forget that I need to change the permission so that it's commons. So if you refresh, we should be able to see each other.
Beautiful. Yeah, I think I'm in now. Yeah.
There we go. So
I used to have an account. Let's see if I can find my way back in. At one point, let's see.
So how do I add something to the agenda here?
Well, if you're on Windows, you can right-click and drag, and that will start drawing an arrow. And then if you let go, you can type in sort of the node you want to create. There's also, if you hold Alt, I think, on Windows and left-click and drag, that's the same sort of thing. If you're on Mac, I think it's like you hold the Options button or something. Or you can just sort of double-click anywhere, and I don't know if I'm still screen sharing. I guess I am. Are you able to see my screen still? Yeah, okay, cool. So yeah, we sort of started off touching on pattern language stuff, but maybe we should revert back a bit because I don't know if everyone here knows everyone else. I know that David had a quick intro to Charles, and I guess just the MetaCAugs idea in brief, but maybe we should stop screen sharing for a second and just sort of, I don't know, introduce whoever hasn't met each other yet.
How do I type? It says title, but I can't type in the box.
Oh, hold on. Maybe if you want to screen share, I can see what you're talking about. But maybe before we get into that, we can just use Zoom. Yeah, you're not able to type there.
Yeah, no, now I'm typing. Never mind.
Okay.
I don't know why I wouldn't type before. Go ahead.
Cool. Well, I can, I guess, go first. Although I think most of you have met me. Obviously I'm hosting this type of call because I'm super interested in how we can use software and other collaborative tools to sort of augment conversation, and very inspired by Douglas Engelbart, who I think all of you would be very familiar with. So this is sort of in that vein of exploration, how we might augment our collective intelligence. Yeah, I'll leave it up to whoever feels moved to intro a little bit about themselves.
I can tag on and say I'm really glad to be here and glad that this is kicking back into gear as this kind of second or third phase of MetaCAugs out of Howard Rheingold and Doug Engelbart. I'm very taken by Tom Atlee. As some of you know, I'm working with him around his Wise Democracy pattern language. And I think just one quick comment on the concept of collective intelligence. I've come in the last year plus to think much more in terms of collective wisdom. And Tom uses the example often that the extermination systems in the Second World War and in the camps were done through collective intelligence, but actually the supporting the whole system and on behalf of everyone for the greater good is the wise element. So.
I've been in the group systems and the collective intelligence with Murray Taroff and Roxanne Heltz at New Jersey Institute of Technology since the mid-70s. Turns out Jim was on our electronic information exchange system, from which the well sprung, and so we're well connected with people that grew out of the early systems. And I'm here, I guess, specifically because I've been shepherding a collaboration laboratory in CoLab, which grew out of ArtChain. Just to give you an idea of, I don't know if I should go into it now, or we should put it on the agenda. The CoLab grew out of, I guess originally it was freetrust.net, and then Scenario and DiviDAO and ArtChain. Started out very much related to ArtChain. Now the Consensus CoLab is one activity that's pretty autonomous within the CoLab, with weekly research really into consensus and then the mathematics of a lot of it's blockchain related, but the mathematics more generally of consensus, and computational calculus group, which is a number of the same people that are looking at new computation models. Of course, ArtChain is part of that, but it's not restricted to that. And then there's Rolang programming in the process calculus. And Robot, which is a bot that's programmed in Rolang, that runs in Discord currently. We can get it to Mattermost. CoLab is currently running in Discord chat, and tried to move over to Mattermost, but it started there because the official communication of ArtChain happens to be Discord, and that's where a number of people came from. The social ledger is our cooperation with Digital Life Collective, and we have a number of people that are, working on that, and some of them are more interested in putting it on ArtChain, and part of what's happening here is liquid democracy. So we have some contracts for liquid democracy on ArtChain that run on ArtChain. And the idea of it is supposed to be the work is the play is the learning, and we run work studies where we try to actually get something done. And it's often the blind leading the blind. We learn how to get the information we need to get some task done, and different people can take different roles and help each other to produce something as a group. And although we have training or exposition, code review. We try to get at least one concrete thing done every work study. And so I'm looking at developing that idea and hopefully get more use cases of projects in the collab. We also, we do some rewards to people. We have a small amount of sponsored cryptocurrency that people can earn by participating in collab activities. So that's why, I guess where there's the issue of the bridges I set up between the collab and open learning. I have a collab channel in the open learning Mattermost, which is bridged to the general channel in the collab Discord. And then I have an open learning channel in Discord that's bridged to the Basecamp channel in Mattermost, the open learning Mattermost. So figuring out how I can get engagement of people in collab activities, or collab activities engaged in what others are doing here, and also providing some support for the social ledger and the tools that are used in used in open learning. Working with your team on the portal and other aspects of the social ledger.
Well, that was very enlightening for me. Let me jump in, which won't be anywhere near as interesting, I suspect, but let me see if I can at least spin the story so it doesn't sound totally boring. As Jim suggested, I got interested in this space back in the late 70s or thereabouts, when I kind of first came across Murray Turoff and Roxanne Hill's book on the Network Nation, which sort of opened my eyes to these things before all of this stuff really took off. And at that point, I was reasonably technically oriented. Consultant in various business systems design environments, worked for what's now Accenture. But along the way, I kept running into the following issue, which is I could never quite grasp why the clever technology ideas that I was working on didn't get traction. Why, and the way I imagined it to myself was why did those stupid users refuse to use the obviously clever technology that we had just developed? That led me back into academia and ultimately a PhD in organizational design and organizational change. There is an overlap between the design space for organizations, the design space of sort of technology infrastructures and support for problem solving, and the sort of constantly growing inventory of problems that we can't solve in an obvious way. And somewhere at the heart of those three pieces is where I'm interested in getting a better understanding. We've had all sorts of runs at that from both the organization side, from here's a new technology tool, Doug Engelbart, I'm going to invent some technology that's going to make us all collectively smarter. Or Mark Zuckerberg, I'm going to connect all the people on the planet and let them share cat pictures, and somehow that's going to make us all better. It's somewhere in that intersection is where the challenge lies, and kind of finding a way to get those of us who appreciate technology to understand humans, and equally important, those of us who understand human and group behavior to understand technological constraints and technological possibilities. To understand kind of how the magic gets done in order to create better magic. So I frequently end up in places like this in the hopes that as I encounter more smart people, ultimately something interesting will fall out of it. That's my story.
I'll go next. So I'm trying to figure out how I fit into this community. So I spent 28 years at IBM, so some of the stuff is kind of leading in strange directions. Before I joined IBM, I was a PhD student and UBC in business strategy, and I'd done an MBA at Northwestern focused on decision support systems. And when I went into IBM, the second project I actually ended up at was Metaphor Data Interpretation Systems, which was a spin-off from Xerox PARC. And so it's interesting reflecting on it now, because it's much easier to describe in hindsight than in foresight, because we were trying to explain at that time, before a Mac existed, that you have a Mac on a Ethernet LAN that writes SQL through a graphical interface. And so it's like, you're doing what? Like, doesn't Windows 3 do that better? And you're going to go, well, not exactly. Anyway, so I worked on that. Particularly on this project, I had a stint through the IBM Advanced Business Institute, which is it doesn't exist anymore. It used to be a free education facility for executives, because IBM loved educating executives and customer executives on new technologies and stuff like that. But that was around the formation of the Time for Institute for Knowledge Management and the rise to knowledge management with Larry Pruzak and Eric Lesser and all those types of people. So I got involved in that. I published my book, which was supposed to be a dissertation, called Open Innovation Learning, and some of the cases in there are actually relevant because when IBM started, so John Patrick came back from a meeting, and all the stuff was going on about Wiki, and they said, we don't know what Wiki is, and so we should probably install one at IBM and try to figure out what to do with it. And so I was one of the people using it. And that's written up in the case study, actually, pretty lengthy case study about IBM learning to use Wiki, because that was when they're actually using open source stuff at the time, because no one really knew what Wiki was all about, and eventually it took off. I've been blogging since 2006. At one point, I was one of the top IBM bloggers, so I've been online a lot. So when Robert says, he ran across some of my writing, it's probably not unusual. Get the right word search terms, you're going to end up there. So other than that, on the mapping stuff, I've actually been on pursuit of mapping software for quite a long time. And so the FreeMind, FreePlane stuff I looked at, but I actually discovered I needed networks more than I needed mind maps. So hierarchical trees aren't going to do it. I was using View, the visual understanding environment from Tufts, and I used that quite a lot. The major problem with that one was, it's still a great thing, but View runs into the issue that with the technology they had at the time, all the text, the only way you could actually get the text to stay on your map was to convert the text to a ping or a JPEG, whatever. So it's actually not text anymore. And so it makes it really tough to use. If they would actually augment that software so it actually did text and exported SVG, then I probably would be using it now. So as I said before, so retired from IBM in 2012. 2014, I started working around the pattern language because in 2011, 2012, I was president of the International Society for the System Sciences. And there's a lot of systems thinking that goes into pattern language, but pattern language people don't really know that. So I've been trying to reintroduce it. Along the ways, I've been refactoring, criticizing, changing some of the way that we should be looking at pattern language, because Christopher Alexander had written it for buildings, not for social systems or information systems. And so there's a lot of adjunctions and philosophy that have been coming along the way as we do that. So right now, one of the reasons that Ward Cunningham has been adding all of these graphing features to Federated Wiki, which is something I actually asked for in 2014, and he's finally gotten around to adding it. Like the progress in the past 3 months has been incredible, because what happened was that Michael Mahaffey, who had worked with Christopher Alexander, might be a student of Christopher Alexander, has recently published a new book on pattern language. And so they decided to put it online. And so the content is available on the wiki. But then he ran into the problem immediately that you can't actually see and feel and understand what's happening in the pattern language because there's too much text on multiple pages. And so now he's been doing all the graphing of the pattern language in Federated Wiki. So that's kind of the status now, and I hope to be able to progress that. And Robert, I'm still not sure what the scope of this group is, but I hope by lurking I'll figure it out.
I just want to pop in and observe just a funny kind of the connections among this. So Larry Prusak and I used to have offices next to one another.
Ah.
and my first book and Larry and I wrote our first book together, Managing Information Strategically. So when we were both at Ernst & Young. So this world is tightly interconnected. It's just finding where the connections exist. That's always fun. So it was great to hear, that you and Larry had intersected it.
We kind of didn't intersect. The interesting part was that IBM had set up the Advanced Business Institute at Palisades, New York, and Larry was in Cambridge. And so it became this interesting push and pull about whether the Institute for Knowledge Management should be at Palisades, where all of the resources were, or whether it should be in Cambridge, where all the people were. And so as it happened, they decided to pull two different directions, which probably weakened both of them, right? As opposed to joining together, you end up competing, and then both of them don't really exist anymore. So, yeah.
Well, which is precisely why I ended up studying organizational behavior rather than technology.
Well, two things actually. One thing that Jim had said, getting back to the Engelbart stuff, is about the sort of co-evolution of the human systems and the tool systems. And I'm curious, I've seen your website is co-evolving, isn't it, David? I'm wondering if there's an intersection there, or if it's often another sort of region of a map somewhere for why that's kind of core for you.
Why the co-evolving title? So the history of the blog originally was that I actually started with two IBMers as an experiment, and then the other two discovered after blogging that they weren't really bloggers, and then so we kind of shut down the blog. And then like 6 months later, it's like, oh, I actually need a place to write this content. So I got the permission. I just got to take this blog over. They said, yeah, you can have it. But the co-evolving actually is somewhat related to the co-evolutionary quarterly stuff that Stuart Brand had written before the Whole Earth catalog and all that sort of stuff. And so back in the old days, you kind of end up with the early people in the systems community. But the idea behind the blog was exactly that the information technology and the social interactions really changed with each other, and especially since we're working at IBM and around a lot of research people. So the sort of projects that one of the projects really interesting was Babel, and Babel was a social network. Well, it was a multi-user chat channel with an interesting feature. They had a graphical interface and you could see when people were socially close to each other or close or far away from each other. You had this marble sort of thing. So they have journal articles written about it, but it was created as an experiment in understanding how people would coordinate on technologies. They end up using Babel as a back channel for the first innovation jam, and then eventually the project ended, and the technology moved on. So there's this point at which people who are I'd say power users more than technologists actually shape the technology because they're using it and they give feedback directly to the people who are building the technology and saying, this is how I'm using it. And they go, oh, developer says, oh, I could build this and that. Yeah, well, if you tried this, I go, oh, I should build that. And then after that, there's this period where then it starts getting more scaled out, and the people stop using it because it gets a little more bureaucratic. I remember that one of the big losses, and it's one of those unfortunate things that happens in with technologies, is IBM adopted Lotus Notes like big time, and the organization change, organization design community inside of IBM had this really immense Lotus Notes database that was just like the knowledge in it was incredible. And then it got to be so large that they figured, oh, we need to move it off this technology. And so IBM formalized knowledge management on like another platform. And then, of course, all the old knowledge didn't get transferred and got lost. And that's also the case with the pattern language stuff that happened inside of IBM. There's a huge amount of pattern language stuff that happened across all divisions, and a lot of communications. And then when they moved the platform, they go, oh, we should make this easier for people to use, all sort of stuff. Then, in effect, they lost the knowledge. It's an unfortunate trade-off about enlarging a community, because the people at the beginning that work with the technology can co-evolve, and they kind of say, it reminds me of the original Palm Pilot, which where, sure, we can do handwriting recognition, but it takes like less than 30 minutes for someone to actually learn to write in graffiti. So we'll have the human beings learn the language as opposed to spending another 10 years of having the machine learn the handwriting. And so that was really practical. And then you kind of go, well, we don't need to learn graffiti anymore. We can do everything, on the keyboard. And then people stop using it entirely. Like now we're typing keys onto all our phones and stuff like that. So yeah, so frustrating. So the co-evolving part is that hopeful early part, or early to before you get to the late majority, where people are learning and actually evolving the technology along with the way they use it.
Yeah, I think I asked because I could sense that there's something there, which is at the core of like the point of this group itself, the MetaCAugs. Well, it evolved, as Charles said, sort of out of a co-learning group that for a course that Howard Rheingold was running on cooperation literacies, which takes kind of a broad perspective look at cooperation as a topic from like a biological sense and sort of a software sense, and lots of different there's a mind map somewhere I could pull up that would explain it, all the different facets better than I could. But after that course ended, we sort of we were doing almost like a book club type thing, and then wanting to sort of continue on that sort of co-learning, peer learning sort of practice. So that in one facet, that's why MetaCAugs lives within the Open Learning Commons, because this is kind of a practice-based co-learning group. But then MetaCAugs itself stands for, almost sounds like metacognition, but it's kind of augmenting our cognition intentionally in a sort of meta type way. So that's where the co-evolving piece would come in here. For me, at least personally, I more or less wanted to play with a bunch of these different tools and see, based on their affordances, how we could integrate some of them together and just get our hands sort of dirty playing with some of a lot of these wonderful tools that are out there. So I don't know, that's just a little bit more context. I don't know if others have been following along with the map. It's kind of hard to keep up with everything that's said, but there's a bit of an evolving map here. Really, I guess for the agenda stuff, I put that we did intros. I only personally mapped a little bit of it myself. We are, as you can see, still recording here with Otter AI stuff. What's really nice is that afterwards it'll pull out keywords and you can do a full keyword search and it'll sort of portal you back into the point in the discussion where we said, I don't know, co-evolving or pattern language or something like that. But yeah, I don't know. That today's call didn't, as you could tell, have like and I don't know how many will have like a strict agenda, but we could also sort of build an agenda asynchronously through the week prior to each call, and sort of we could each take a round in pitching what we'd like to talk about, but or demo or something like that. Yeah. I think also just from last night, both David and I had attended a meetup in Toronto that was run by Peter Jones, sort of giving an outline of some of the work he's been doing on what's called the Systemic Design Toolkit. I think I got that right. And it's kind of this huge, deep, massive suite of kind of like facilitation tools with canvases and processes behind each one to sort of iterate back and forth from like a systemic thinking to a design thinking type approach of how do we sort of frame problems, how do we sort of elucidate sort of who are the actors in the system and how might we sort of perturb some bit of it or maybe sense some bit of it. I don't know if I'll add a link, but I think I'll just stop talking for now, see if any of that sort of.
Yeah, I don't know what happened to Joachim. We lost him. I'm in another call here.
Oh.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I did have a work study scheduled for this half hour, so I'll have to sign off. This is all exciting. I want to learn how to use this MetaMaps tool. I think the protocols for cooperative learning are really what I'm interested in, as opposed to the peer-to-peer side of it, and how we build from the bottom up, sort of based on the idea that decentralized communities sort of have to build from where people are. But I look forward to continuing this, and I guess I'll catch the rest of the video. I don't know if you have a video from the last meeting. Certainly like to take a look at that. And I guess in terms of the technology side of this, I'm available to participate in developing that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. See you next week.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing is typically I would only have scheduled these for about an hour. So just to be, we have about 15 minutes left. I don't know how much more we could get into, but this, I don't know if other people have seen real-time board, but just speaking previously about some of the canvases, think sort of like business model canvas. If you've seen something like that, you can sort of get an SVG or some other sort of vector graphic and drop it into a tool like this and sort of infinitely zoom in and add as many little sticky notes as you want. So that's what Miro is really good for. So just figured we could play with this as well one day if we wanted to sort of, in some ways that's how I think of MetaMaps, is it could be used as sort of a facilitation based substrate to run different processes over, but then as well tools like Miro, aka also known as real-time board, would be good for this sort of thing as well. So yeah, there'd be a lot to experiment with, I think.
Rob, is that a free version or is it paid through somewhere, or what can you get for free? I looked at it briefly, and I think is it a trial, or are you using it?
Yeah, it is. You do have to pay, though. We could figure out sort of. I think you get a certain number of boards for free, and I think you can technically invite unlimited people to a board, but I'm just clicking here. It seems, I bet you, yeah, I need to upgrade to just have a link that I can share to anyone. But I think if you gave me your email, I could add you here and then you can edit with me. So I think, I don't know, not that this is really down that avenue, but what we did on the last call for context for you, David, is we sort of talked a little bit about our own personal practices on how we do knowledge management and how we augment ourselves. I didn't really dive into mine, but we sort of set a future intention to sort of almost interview each other one-on-one and sort of dive down deep into each person's personal knowledge management sort of infrastructure. I said that just because it occurred to me that I'm obviously sharing my browser here, and there's probably see a million different things, but one is I have a Chrome extension for managing my Chrome extensions. So here's that, and I can sort of on the fly turn on whether I want a lightweight set of extensions or like RAM non-issue set of extensions if I'm on my desktop or that sort of thing. Just to, I don't know, before the call ends, give a broader flavor of sort of what we hope to play with on future calls, or what we could put on an agenda.
What was the name of that extension, by the way?
Oh, this one, hold on. I don't know if it's actually called Context. Maybe it is, but I'll share a link for it. And then, yeah, here's another extension I use for searching my extensions. Here, I'll just share this link. Where do you want it? I guess that's the other thing, is I wasn't sure where we would keep notes today, because technically there's this thing running in the background, the Otter AI. I actually emailed them because I was curious if we could like collaboratively like manually update these as it goes, but it turns out I tried to test it on my own in multiple browsers, and it looks like you can't. So we'll just have to do sort of post-processing if we really wanted to go back and sort of fix up the transcription and add notes and links and stuff to it.
It looks really good, though. It's very cool.
Yeah, well, I'll share the link to it after, so anyone that wants to sort of go back and play with it and see how it works. And I just shared the link into the MetaCAugs channel for the Chrome extension. I was just
okay. Thanks.
Yeah, that's the other thing. I don't know. There's so much. I don't know. There's so many things I would want to demo or like sort of hack together little tools. One of which is an extension of MetaMaps itself that integrates with both Slack and Mattermost, that enables us to have our back channel be the Mattermost, and as we're typing in there, I don't think I've turned on that integration, but how it would work is basically anything we type into the channel here through the use of reactions. I think I imported the set through the use of reactions. Oh no, I didn't import the set, never mind. Basically, all of these on MetaMaps, which are called MetaCodes, which are the like visual glyphs that we've sort of made a set. It's not an open-ended set. I would prefer that it was that if we could sort of develop a folks ontology or something in the types of things we create. But basically, this whole set here can be imported into a Slack or a Mattermost, and if you add that reaction onto any individual message, it automatically pulls it into the map that you've sort of bridged into that channel. So it'd be an interesting way that we could play with sort of having our text back channel be easily pulled into a map or something like that. Yeah, I don't know. Thoughts on how to sort of run this session in the future differently or better, or I know it was kind of somewhat of a crazy on the fly sort of just make it up as we go type thing, which in some sense is what I want. It's just kind of a group of people that are okay with sort of playing with a whole bunch of different tools at once and learning as we go. But any feedback would be appreciated.
Well, there's certainly a point at which I find myself overwhelmed and wonder kind of how to get beyond, how to bridge between playing with the various capabilities ideas and capabilities, and then understanding it well enough to tackle a specific problem. And so I'm feeling a little overwhelmed at the, in the fire hose environment, which is not unusual. I feel overwhelmed much of the time, and I think that's the kind of world we live in. But then the question becomes, how do you either individually or with a support infrastructure, find your way out of that state and into some state of making progress with it. I mean, one way to find your way out of all of this is to throw up your hands and say, I'm going to go take my marbles and go home. And I think that's what a lot of people actually do. That doesn't get us very far in solving problems, but I think that's not an unusual response. And so I'm at one point I'm feeling that response, that sense, but resisting the urge to throw up my hands and run away screaming and hide in the corner. So I don't quite know what the next step is, but that's what's going to keep me here while we figure it out, I suspect. If that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
I think. Sorry, I was typing without muting, but yeah, I basically agree. And my thought, my sort of tag on there is, I think it's great and actually important, and maybe should be a regular part of these calls is to either one-on-one or somehow chip away at sketching out our respective kind of favorite tools and combinations and duct taping and so forth. And I think, like Jim, you were reflecting on sort of understanding enough or playing with certain tools, I guess, enough to tackle certain problems. And I think, having the eye on that's the objective, to be able to actually use these things impactfully. And for me, like I certainly have certain tools, some hip ones or some, ones that I just like and I'm used to. And if they work, they work. And if they go together in certain combinations, like they don't have to be perfect in themselves or the best for everyone, but there is, sort of different factors of which ones play nice with each other and are interoperable. And I think overall, this would be a great goal. We're a ways off as far as everything all fitting together nicely and playing nicely.
Oh, and I don't think things do play. I think that's that's the false promise of a whole lot of kind of marketing literature. We have the secret tool. We have the secret method, whatever. I think the reality is that if you're going to tackle tough problems, you're going to need to, assemble you're going to have to assemble a reasonably powerful set of tools, and B, you're going to have to learn how to use them with some degree of facility. And that is a play. There is some play involved in that, and there is some learning to be done. As you said, duct taping things together, and if nothing else, to create some story around those things that can be shared with others who aren't quite ready to accept that reality. Way back when I was a CKO, I was a chief knowledge officer in a 1,000-person consulting firm, and I ultimately came to the conclusion that the most important problems to be dealt with in knowledge management were about personal knowledge management. If you can't manage your knowledge at the personal level, it doesn't matter what the organization is doing to do knowledge management. It's a waste. They'll spend a lot of money doing it, and as to David's point, they'll have they may in fact have really powerful stuff, but if no one can make use of it because they don't understand how to manage their own kind of space, their own the garden in their backyard, it doesn't matter if there's a 100-acre resource behind their backyard, because they'll never find their way to it or know what to do with it. And that's that promise that somehow I don't have to do any work, the organization's going to solve the problem for me, is a lie. And we're all here because we know that you got to do the work yourself. And then the real question is, how do we make that work a little less painful for those people who haven't already gotten there? And guide people by the hand gently, if you will, to here's how your own work practices have to evolve if you want to cope with this.
One of the things that that I focus on that a lot of people I think tend not focus on is I actually am interested in the open source communities that are supporting the software, and so I kind of wander around, and so one of the reasons I've been focused on Federated Wiki is that the community has actually been moving forward, primarily because Ward Cunningham has been at the center of it, but over the past 6 months, there's been a lot of activity, and particularly with David Boville picking up on it and trying to drive it. And so one thing I do not like is technologies that go and then fall off to nowhere. So one of the historical things that happened, I blogged about this, was System Thinking World was a group on LinkedIn with 19,000 people in it.
I was part of it.
Yeah.
At one point, yeah.
When Gene Bellinger decided he didn't like the technology anymore and abandoned it, that's when Benjamin Taylor and I kind of picked up, and Benjamin Taylor actually deserves most of the credit for moving it on to what we call the ecology of system thinking. And I've been moving to Facebook and stuff like that. But then Benjamin himself moved on to model.report. It was on a platform called Lobsters, which had one developer. And lo and behold, 3 years later, the guy decides he doesn't want to support it anymore. And so the Systems Community of Inquiry, syscoi.com, I've done specifically on WordPress. And I'm using the O2 template. Specifically because that's what WordPress uses internally.
Right.
And so it's like, and so for Benjamin, I said, I actually host my own WordPress sites, but this one, because it's based off a template that's supported by somebody else, it's like we want to actually, spend the 60 Canadian a year to have them do it. So, because I don't want to be fixing this stuff. I just want to work on content, right?
Right.
So, one of the suggestions I'd have for this group is to actually be working on content and use that in order to drive the tools that we need rather than doing it the other way around.
I like that. Yeah. I think it's a great piece of advice.
Yeah. Because one of the things, and I'm a victim of this as well, is in the pattern language community, like when you go to the PLOP conference, they write patterns. Now, one of the problems I have is that they don't actually know what they're writing because they're really badly formatted, but they do have output. So I give them credit for that. But I have not yet written a pattern language because I've actually been working on it. And that's the intent, to start working on that on Federated Wiki, because I think it's a sufficiently stable platform that we can do that. That being said, a lot of the features of that we're talking about with these tools, dragging and dropping and visualization sorts of things that you see in mapping is not really present in Federated Wiki. And a long time ago, Ward had actually pointed out in a long discussion, he was saying that Wiki is the slowest changing platform ever. So before you put stuff on Wiki, it has to be really, really well worked out. And so that's led me to appreciate chats and conversations, stuff like Mattermost to a greater extent, because there's stuff that happens in the transcripts, and so I think Otter AI is a good move in this direction, that we actually have a full transcript. But then the question is, how do you manage the post-processing after that? So the ideal thing would be to have it to have the full Otter AI content go into a Federated Wiki, and then we could drop drag and drop paragraphs out into other parts of the wiki because it's actually that modular. But we haven't done it before. We haven't tried it, so we don't know whether it's feasible or practical or desirable. Yeah.
And David, to what extent have you checked out what Rob was referring to with Slack and Mattermost integration with MetaMap? Is that something you're aware of?
I haven't used that primarily because I haven't had a need to. So if it is a project where we're working on together, then it's kind of like, oh, okay, this is what we would do. So So in my personal workflow, I'm down to HTML. I use Blue Griffin as an editor. If you look on the web and you find a digest written by me, because I go to conferences and I write up, what I do is I write what I hear, which is not always what is said, but it's always interesting when you go and the guy says, okay, we're going to talk about 4 things, and then he lists 3 of them, right? So I actually don't do processing of the content from other people while I'm listening to it. Other people have different styles, of course, so they're doing drawings. But for me, the text is actually the most information rich, I guess. And this comes from some of the experience at IBM Research when I was asking, why do you guys focus so much on text? And they were saying, because it's indexable. And that's why you do it. And so even now, like we're talking about Otter AI, and in effect, you're taking voice to text because we can index the text. The voice is actually in a context, and we could go back and see that someone was talking about something else before, or talking about something else after, and how it flows. But the time sequence in a conversation is quite valuable in the initial capture. After we do that, though, post-processing gets to be an interesting process.
Sure. No, that's really cool. I mean, for me, my question was also just kind of reflecting on exploring the either existing or to come or emerging connections between conversations and mapping. And I think this is a broader topic also at Federated Wiki. But I think it's a very cool, kind of elegant solution, partial in the bigger picture, but as a way to, let's say, tag or flag quickly with these emoji or reactions to generate branches in the map. I'm taking my notes into XMind, which is text-based mind mapping. I just happen to like to do that, kind of to format it visually. And that's very sort of rough and manual, and I'm always looking for what's going on or how to make those connections between making sense out of, even if it's all text, then like my manual approach is to paste it into like OneNote or even directly into XMind or another map, and then just start to kind of structure it visually and into blocks and things like that. But yeah, how to kind of automate as much of that. I'm all ears and eyes.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting. That's why I think sort of 2 things. One, I think it's good to have sort of some portion of the call sort of be open, exploratory, and just playing with affordances. And then, yeah, maybe another portion to be sort of like, what is the content? Where are we trying to get to? What sort of process or sort of game? There's kind of a I'm very well. I was on the Holo team, and there's this concept within. I don't know if everyone here is familiar with the MetaCurrency project, but they have a concept called game shifting, which is basically almost like a facilitation dashboard type idea, but that we would intentionally shift from like one mode of cooperation, say we're taking turns or something, but that you would make that explicit on some sort of a dashboard or something. So maybe that would be like, ideally, that's where I'd want to get with some of these co-learning teams, is that you could almost on the fly name a game or a certain mode we want to play within, and then the team itself would be sort of polymorphic in that, okay, now we're going to play this other type of game in which we facilitate ourselves to do, like it's set up for this type of a process, and that yeah, whatever the content is that we want to focus on, we choose the game mode that is sort of best at approaching that. Obviously, I don't know. I'm not personally there yet. That's sort of another piece of this call, is to try and find a team that wants to sort of play in that direction. But looks like we're just a little bit past the hour. I don't know if everyone's kind of needs to make a hard stop or not. I have a little more time if we want to stay on, but see what you think.
I need to move on, but this was and I will eventually get past the feeling completely overwhelmed to feeling only normally overwhelmed. There's a level of being overwhelmed. It's just life, but I'm a little past that right now. So, but I'll catch up. And these conversations certainly help with doing that. So thanks for setting it up, and we'll see everyone next week, I hope. So
yeah,
take care all.
Hope so. All the best.
Bye.
Take care. So, Rob, I have a couple more minutes myself. Just to mention, also, so David took off. Jim maybe is okay. Cheers. Oh, yeah. Fine. So we're still rolling, and I just shortly before the call today started kind of trying to get a grip for myself on a mind map. Well, I made a new mind map, Open Learning Commons, and just also flagging links for the various channels, relevant channels in the Dig Life Mattermost, because I haven't really spent time in the portal and kind of gotten my way, knowing my way around. And there's, some of my channels I really want to catch up on or keep track of, and so putting them into a map. And I think that could be useful also, just because there are already a number of different channels within Open Learning Commons, or how does that fit in sort of architecture-wise, or just structurally with the bigger picture of Dig Life, and then maybe beyond. Obviously, it's not limited to Dig Life, so there are other channels, perhaps networks or groups that are plugging in or that are in the mix, even just in the conversation. So just trying to sketch out the big picture.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say that I'm sort of tracking everything. I'm sort of well behind on lots of the channels, particularly in the Digital Life Collective sort of section of things. For now, at least, the Open Learning Commons space only has a few channels, and I'm sort of tracking them all so far. But yeah, I think something we had done prior when we were on Slack would be appropriate again now, particularly as more channels emerge, is to, sort of be sense making and mapping the channels so that the map is an interface to the space. And there technically is sort of a search box that you can search each domain within. It doesn't do a full sort of like server search. It's only whatever team you're currently in, you can search that whole space. So if you're looking for something and you're in multiple spaces, like actually I guess I'll share my screen here for a second.
Okay, that's within the portal you're referring to.
Yeah, well, actually, I personally haven't been using the portal so much, although maybe that's a mistake. Yeah, so for me, like, I have a bunch on the Digital Life Collective server, and I'm actually using the Mattermost sort of desktop app, so I can switch actually back and forth between the two different spaces that I use. So I'm still in the holochain space. Really, it's only the kind of public side of that, and then within Digital Life Collective, as you sort of get more deeply involved, there's an operations team. There's actually, I don't really know what this is. I haven't spent too much time in the partners area, but then there's also sort of like a project section. So they've sort of made a distinction between sort of interest-based channels where we're just chatting about whatever interests us. Maybe it's privacy or distributed web tech or something. But then the project space is more for like actual teams forming around like projects that they want to sort of move forward. And then, yeah, obviously the open learning space, and Christina has a space that's sort of dedicated to like all things mapping that she sort of created. And there's a team forming around creating our own mapping software and using that as a facilitation tool, and how that can be like an enterprise of its own around making money using our own tool, and then using some of those funds to then fund the further development of that tool. So but that's sort of an evolving thing at this stage, and it relates. So the weekly ecosystem mapping calls, that's the point of this channel in Open Learning Commons, as sort of a back channel for that space.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of this is kind of interwoven. I guess in my head, I see maybe a bit more of the bigger picture than you're currently seeing, but I don't know. I definitely don't have it all mapped out. So I guess that's something I'll have to do while playing with processing all the different artifacts we've created on this call, the transcription, the Zoom recording, the MetaMap. Maybe you would even want to share. I'm sure you've created a map or something. How do you weave those things together, and then
Yeah.
have it not be distinct artifacts, but like if you click on one, it sort of can portal you into the other. And ideally that would be, and I guess that's how the current portal works. I don't know. Like I was going to say earlier, it's probably a mistake that I haven't been using it that much, but I don't know. I've recognized recently that I've sort of got a whole bunch of things on the go at once. So it's kind of, haven't been putting a lot of time into sort of creating new interfaces to making navigating them a little easier, whatever. Actually, I don't know why I'm screen sharing anymore. Cool. Well, yeah.
I can relate to all that. Yeah.
We didn't exactly get into mapping some of the pattern language stuff yet today, but
That's true.
I'm sure it'll come along.
Yeah, I'm going a week from today. I'll be actually. I guess I will be traveling. I'll be already in meetings and arriving at Finhorn next week, Tuesday. So I won't be making that call. But and the following week, I'm trying to think. I might actually be able to make it because I'll just be back, and then I think it's the next day. I'll have my daughters for a week for the holidays. So, but anyway, most weeks I'll be around. Generally, it's a good day. And I think like what you just went through, and I suppose it'll evolve as far as channels in different spaces and how they kind of intersect or could be, let's say, the navigation between the different areas could be more intentional or more, kind of made easier somehow. That's always what I try to do also with my OneNote, for example, kind of creating these navigation links. So just to finish the thought, I think it would be valuable for us to go through even for like 10 minutes, but just a little bit slower and kind of actually map those out and then have that be part of a kind of evolving visualization, maybe simply in MetaMaps or whatever, and have the links all handy like that.
Yeah, actually, I'm gonna test something out here again. I think what I did was I dragged in here a link to, yeah, there it is. So it's the channel link to MetaCAugs on this map. And I think if I click on it, it'll open up to it. Let's see. Yeah, so it opens up straight to the channel. So we could pull in links because it's a web app as well. You don't have to use the desktop app. We could make a map of all these different channels and sort of make our own little version of a portal that sort of jumps you into places. Yeah,
it's a sort of a complementary portal or another kind of dashboard, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, well, I think on a very simple level, something that we're trying to get at is like when we're having calls like these and everybody wants to share links and share thoughts all sort of simultaneously, is like, where is the place that we're dumping those sort of things in real time so that it's most useful to everyone? So it could be kind of cool, say, if we did want to sort of direct people like, hey, everybody come to this channel now, and like right there, or we can all click on this link or something. So I think it's one piece of what we're trying to figure out is like, what should everybody be looking at basically, if not each other's faces? Like, is there a better thing such as a map or something like that too?
Yeah.
And even, I don't know, even what you had pointed out that, hey, why don't we, maybe we could use that MetaMapper sort of bot in here to pull into the map, and then
or it may not be urgent, but I think it's really cool and potentially groundbreaking. Anyway, there's a lot of different directions to go in, and a lot of exciting affordances which are either there or they could be there if they were kind of embraced collectively. But yeah, how to kind of decide priorities, it's also always a challenge within the bandwidth that everyone has. It occurs to me, it's a little bit obvious, and you can, a lot of people grumble about Google, but we might as well have a folder and various Google Docs and things.
Yeah, actually, I was this tool here, draw.io. I did test the Miro thing, and it turns out we probably won't use it because I tried to share it to you up here, and I said send, but then it immediately says you can only have a certain number of team members access a map, and I've already shared it to like 2 or 3 people. So unless we want to pay for it, but then it reminded me that there's this more open thing, like this completely open source thing called draw.io, and it basically can save, well, it can export to different things, one of which is actually an XML, so you have full sort of data access. It's not just a visual snapshot of a map, but it's a nice tool for sort of drawing, and I think it's like somewhat collaborative. So maybe if I share this link with you.
So I just added it under the tools on MetaMaps.
Yeah. I think I just signed in with my Google account or something. But then the neat thing would be is that we, whoa, sorry, I started getting another call. We could pull in some of those templates, like the canvases that are really just, because they're vector graphics, you can scale as much as you want and sort of use this space as almost like a sticky note type space. And then it's open enough, and I think it works relatively real time. It's not as nice as the Miro sort of seeing where each other's pointers are, but yeah, I don't know. I feel like I'm holding I guess it does come back to the tools each time, like holding a whole bunch of different things in my head. 1 second here.
It's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. This is going to be interesting, I think, the Otter AI stuff.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, I think that's really again the big question about how to get to the next step. Like once you have all that text and it looked quite good, then then what? You know, what do you want? What can you do? What you know? And like, let's not try to even answer those more now. But I think that's really kind of the pregnant question.
Yeah, and I sort of, well, actually, related to the SVG thing, it relates to pattern languages, because I want to sort of create a template for cards that are just SVGs, and then you just fill in the different boxes with like metadata, and then you can have a very quick sort of shareable image file that you can plop into different things like a Mattermost or a Slack to sort of draw a card out or something like that.
Wait, what's SVG? SDG?
SVG. It's just it's like sort of like an scalar vector, or
right.
Never mind. Okay. Scalable vector graphics. It's like an image format, except for it's super powerful because I think it's XML based, so that it's not just like some pixels on the screen. You can embed sort of other images within it. You can embed text, and you can host it either raw on a web page, or you can sort of package it up, I guess, as like a file of its own with a .svg sort of extension. So it's yeah, the Ward Cunningham and the Federated Wiki group are sort of experts in this. And actually, there's a thing called GraphViz, which is a library that they use, and one of the things it can export to is a SVG. So it does sort of like automated graph drawing. And actually, that was something I wanted to. Well, they weren't around, right? I don't know. There's so many things to show. I'll just show this as the last thing, and then I think I need to hop off because I keep getting a call. But basically, this is Federated Wiki is made in some sense for designing pattern languages. And what's neat about the stuff they've been doing recently with the GraphViz plugin, or I don't know if it's a GraphViz plugin, but anyways, they're working on, as David had mentioned, visualizing Federated Wiki spaces as a graph. And what's neat is it's hard to read some of these, but they're actually clickable. So you can see if I click on these, it actually changes the different pages.
Oh yeah.
So you can sort of be collaboratively writing, and then this graph, it's just based on the pages that exist within your sort of Federated Wiki site. And you can sort of based on metadata and what pages link to other pages, or like what page contains a link to another page. That's basically what dictates how these graphs are drawn. And that graph viz thing I was just referencing is what does the sort of automated layout. And then this here, all this is an SVG, except for it's not just an image. As you can see, it's clickable, and it can tell where you click in the different regions and pull up.
Okay. And can you put that link or something in the like MetaCAugs channel? Or that
Yeah.
would be really cool.
I'll just delete this so that it's seeing it like draws it on the fly. But yeah, I'll share this in the.
That's really cool.
Share this.
I didn't hear. I don't remember if David Boville had mentioned GraphViz, but is he?
Oh yeah, he's a power user of it, and both him and
Right.
Ward both have used it because it's, I don't know, it's a pretty old thing. Like the GraphViz, I think it's written in C or something like that. It's been around for a long time,
Right.
and people have been using it because it can export to so many different file types, both this SVG thing or even like GIF or PNG, like just as an image if you need.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, that's really great. Okay, so cool. Yeah, I guess we should wrap up. You know, always more and more to talk about.
Yeah, it's endless.
The whole you know, Kumu thing. I think I'm not really going to stress. Tom Atlee and Martin Rausch are meeting on Friday. There was some delays. I think maybe I had mentioned last week or whenever in regard to the printing and the kind of finalizing also of the website. But we also put a video together for this workshop we're doing at Climate Change and Consciousness, and gearing up for that, which is happening pretty soon this month. But the new website with the new version 2.0 Wise Democracy Pattern Language will be up possibly as of next week or pretty soon. And I think once the PDF, the kind of the printable PDF is available, then that can be, I guess, used for generating the Kumu, if I understand. So we can come back around that. Once you need kind of distinct URLs for each of the patterns, if I recall, or the images.
Well, it depends how sort of like rich you want the map. If you want images in the cards as you like click a node and it pulls up the sidebar, if you want it to show images, then basically all that's needed is a spreadsheet that where each row represents a card, and each column represents the different metadata on that card. So maybe it's the title, I forget what the properties are, but like the title, the description, URL linking to somewhere on the web where the image is hosted. So you need the metadata broken down into columns, and then also if they did what they did in the past, where it's like related cards at the bottom, you would need something.
7, yeah, for each.
Yeah, so how that would work is so there's a node list, which is what I just described. Each row is a card or a node, and it has each column is some sort of piece of metadata on it. But then there's an edge list, which is basically like card A relates to card B, and it's just like a from to, just 2 columns, from to, and you just basically each node needs to have a unique ID. So each pattern, I guess the name of the pattern could be its unique ID. And then in that from to column, you would just have, say, like from pattern A to pattern B, because there's a relationship there. So those 2 things are what's needed to basically, you just point Kumu at that Google spreadsheet or whatever spreadsheet, and then it'll create a map out of it.
Do you have a template already, or maybe I don't know if I ever got such a spreadsheet from the other one, but if it's easy enough just to sort of have a blank version, then that might be useful to start with. But
yeah, well, I think I don't know, I forget, the Kumu expects like an exact sort of, I don't know if it's from to or source target or something like that, but what I just described is basically the template. Like you need an edge list which has from to relationships, just 2 columns, and it'll have a header, but it really doesn't matter what you name the header, because we can just rename it 10 seconds before importing it into Kumu. And then the node list, there is no template, because you can have an arbitrary amount of metadata. Like you can have as many columns as you want, and each row just represents a card. So
okay,
it's kind of like there is no template, because you get to you get to create your as much metadata as you want. And then the same thing technically applies to the edge list. That like all it really needs is a from and a to, but then each additional column you can add more metadata. So maybe you could say the type of relationship, because the edge lists are like relationships, or you can add text as a label on that edge. So maybe the edge says like, but again, that's just, those aren't required pieces of metadata. So really it's just two spreadsheets, a node list and an edge list.
Oh, I see.
And yeah, you can create that in whatever tool you like. And then if needed, I can, like literally it would probably take like a couple minutes to polish up those spreadsheets to be the exact format that Kumu expects. So
okay.
And I think it's in their documentation somewhere. I think it's, yeah.
Okay, if it's something you think of, we can throw it over, but it's not pressing. But you know, I'm just still thinking about it and sort of ready to possibly, you know, swiftly and easily just make it happen once all that information is available in one place.
Yeah. The other thing I can help with is, well, you said it's, I forget if you said it's in a PDF form, but if it's not currently in a spreadsheet form, because that's not how they think and work, that I could also help, like depending on the format it's in, I could help do a little bit of sort of like automated scraping, or, because I think that's what I did on the last, because they already had it on the website, I was just able to scrape the website and basically pull down all the metadata I wanted, and it's quick and easy to put it in a spreadsheet. So if,
okay.
yeah,
okay,
if some help is needed, I can definitely help sort of push that forward instead of, definitely don't have anybody sort of manually typing into a spreadsheet all the data.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
No. I mean, it wouldn't be anyone else but me, but I'd rather, yeah, if there's a quicker way, for sure. Again, I'm just kind of watching out for when that final version will be ready, and they're just figuring out, you know, putting it on the website like that. So that's where it is.
Cool, awesome. Well, I will hit stop on the recording and I'll send it to the channel later, and we'll see what comes, who builds on top of it. So that's what I'm sort of most interested in. And it's always nice chatting with you.
All the best. Yes, likewise. Take care. See you soon.